After all this, you still...
I still want that gas, yes. And you had better deliver.
A little red
Ready
dot.
as I'll ever be.
Yeah, my body is ready, folks. Okay.
I had a bunch of
6.
pre-workout tonight, so I am alive. I'm feeling like a live wire.
Oh, you are up
Nice.
and at it then.
Yeah, this is as
We
close
we
to
talking C4. We talking
Yo, hang on, let me get
caged.
this
What
shit.
we working with?
No, hang on, let me get this shit. All right, so I have a theory that pre-workout needs to look like it was designed by like a steroid addicted man in his garage, right? And this
Right.
one meets the bill for sure. This is called Edge of Insanity. The label is completely incoherent.
Man,
but
this
like,
is like a box of gas station boner pills. I'm not.
Yeah, I was
I'm
gonna
not-
say it's actually bad.
it is like, so like some of this stuff, I don't know about this one, but some of it like does make you piss hot for meth. Like there are pre-workouts you can buy, and it's not the same drug, but it's so chemically similar.
It's got like a ephedrine
Like,
in it or some shit.
I forget what it's called. One of them is like DMHA, I think, or DMAE. And it is like this is as close to intoxicated as I get. Like I've done drugs before, and it's comparable to like real legit drugs. So I highly recommend it to your listeners. I'm just here to plug the pre-workout.
Absolutely, folks. I mean, again, if you need to piss hot for methamphetamines for whatever reason, this is the
But you don't want to do the meth.
Exactly. Like, you know what?
If you'd like to go back to prison.
If there's a
And
job
maintain your
interview
sobriety.
that you got and they have to make you do a drug test and you're halfway through the interview process, you're like, I actually don't want this job, but I don't want to test positive for like weed or something. What do I want to do? Huh?
I
The
don't
company
want.
that makes that stuff is called Psychopharma. Just FYI.
Yeah,
This is definitely a company in some dude's basement. I'm not even.
that's what I'm saying, man. Yeah, it's what's keeping me going right now. It's just I'm bringing the edge of insanity energy to the greenhouse.
just blowing rails of pre-workout in your kitchen.
People eat this shit dry. People like you could find like it's very common for like bodybuilders and powerlifters to like just scoop it and like dump it into their mouth.
Have you ever seen like those strongman competitions where they give the guy the smelling salt before he does like the deadlift? Do you just give a guy like a line of this before?
It would probably, even if it didn't chemically do anything, I'm sure that it would hurt bad enough that it would get you like your adrenaline
Exactly.
racing. Yeah.
If you got to help a friend move, that has been my cheat. Like, you know, coffee's gonna make you shit. Eating a big breakfast, you're gonna fall asleep. Pre-workout before you help a friend move.
Absolutely.
That's the trick. That's the trick.
I think pre-workout before just about anything. Why not?
Right,
You know,
right. Pre-workout before bed. That's the best way to get your, a good night's sleep.
I have gotten to a point with my caffeine habit. It was better for a while, but now it's back to where like I drank an energy drink earlier today and then immediately fell asleep on my lunch break. Like it was like nothing.
Yeah, this is why caffeine tolerance breaks are good. But again, like all of us who work office jobs, we get fueled by caffeine and caffeine related substances.
As an office worker, I get fueled by my love of the office and my allegiance to my company.
Absolutely, we are corporate professionals above all else, and in this corporate friendly podcast called Greenhouse Gaslighting, folks, I'm very excited to have CJ and Kade from MINDGAMEZ. Highly recommend it if you haven't heard them already. Do you guys want to maybe introduce the show for folks who have not heard it yet but are sure to love it?
Well, that's a big promise.
No, trust me. It is. I don't know if you guys feel confident about the show you've put out there, but it is worth all the praise and all the hype.
Well, thank you. That's kind.
We do have like 2 positive reviews, so
that's all you need. That's all you need.
We're lined up.
Yeah, so I'm CJ. one of the three co-hosts of Mind Games. Our partner in crime, Alex, couldn't make it tonight. He's moving, so he's got a million things going on. But our show is a I don't know, like an irreverent dive into video games as a kind of propaganda arm for the deep state. And we cover a game a week, and we talk about its relationship with like historical events, or ongoing social issues, or conspiracy theories, or whatever. And we say dumb shit. It's not super serious. So that would be Kid. You got anything to add?
I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, and on the subject of, because I think like in one of the earlier intros to an episode, you guys said how video games are basically the devil.
Yes.
And I know that's like an overstatement.
Yes.
But in terms of the effect that games and the dissonant effects of playing the game has on the player, I think Kade, you talked about this in the Far Cry 3 episode about ludonarrative dissonance.
Yes.
Which again, you guys are downplaying like the expertise on the subject here, and I know that podcasts are casual and fast and loose, but again, you guys have a good concept here, so stay strong with it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And also another aspect of this is all the games that you guys talked about in the early episodes, like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 4, Far Cry 3, BioShock and BioShock Infinite. These came out like around the time I was in high school.
Yep.
So hearing like the kind of extended discussion you guys were having, and the kind of perspectives these games have on things like the morality of the United States as an institution, the kind of civic religion we have built around the country, and things like that, and how these games actually like divert us away from critically considering those things, even though a critical examination might in fact be more entertaining. So yeah,
absolutely. Well, I think that that's one of the more rewarding parts of doing the show, is that I was probably 16 when Far Cry 3 came out. I remember playing BioShock in 9th or 10th grade. It was all, a lot of the games we're talking about are high school games, and so I remember having the experience of being a kid and playing them, and then coming back to them as an adult is I think that's, like I said, one of the most, it's rewarding because it's you get to remember firsthand how it felt to play these games, and to how they affected you as a child, which is, I would argue, the target audience for these games. And then coming back and looking at me like, wow, that is fucked up. That sucks. We can cuss, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. We're gonna be in trouble if we can't. So, but yeah, no, we're doing it. You can see my dog in the background. He's being weird. I don't know what's going on.
He's being a baby. Kade, anything you had there? I'm sorry.
No.
Okay.
What was the question?
We were just talking about how these games were the ones we played in high school, and actually you guys were playing them around the same time frame I was too. So,
and I kind of had a secondhand experience from it, because I didn't really get into playing anything but old computer games until college, and a lot of it actually through CJ. So
yeah, I poisoned him. Now he's living with the consequences.
Yeah, I think we can definitely, I think there was a bit of a stretch at the time of do violent video games desensitize people to violence? And that's always a question that comes up in the discourse around video games, and that typically tends to be a talking point older people run with, and people who are younger just tend to be the game playing audience, and they're like, well, no, that's not necessarily the case. But I mean, do you think games like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 4 especially, or Modern Warfare, it was Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, that's such a confusing title.
Yeah, terrible
do you
title.
think it desensitized people? Because especially I don't want to get into modern day politics too much, and we want to get to, you know, the star of the show, which is Assassin's Creed 3 and the series at a point. But do you think, like, you know, this game that in its quote unquote accurate depiction of modern day warfare actually had a role in desensitizing a lot of people to the violence of modern warfare? And that's why we see things like people viewing things like the conflict in Afghanistan and Iraq, and then today, especially Russia and Ukraine, as a spectacle for entertainment, rather than, you know, a really serious and fucked up situation we shouldn't try to be, you know, viewing as like vicarious entertainment.
I think you could definitely draw a direct line between like people who played Call of Duty that started like flipped a switch in their life when they were like Call of Duty 4, I mean, and then the people who are like suiting up and going and fighting on the front lines in Ukraine and then tweeting about how they want to go home and how horrible it is
Yeah.
and how they don't get any nice guns and or any body armor. They realize they're just fucking cannon fodder. Yeah, I think there's definitely a direct line.
That's like that. Like what you talked about is like a line that I think is really hard to define for people, because like I think we want to be critical of video games and we want to be critical of like not depictions of violence. Like I'm not anti-violence in media by any stretch of the imagination, but critical of like maybe senseless violence or violence that's used to produce an ideological effect. But I think it's important to like establish that position without just turning into Tipper Gore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like, but yeah, I think I like.
I feel like if you tried to tell somebody what our show is about, like you may get people who are like, well, like they must hate video games or think that they shouldn't. Like, there's like some sort of cognitive dissonance between the subject of our show and the fact that we all actually love to play video games at the same time.
Right. But yeah, no, I mean, it's the thing that's like, you know, I don't think that like games turn people into killers on like a 1-to-1 ratio. I mean, I certainly have played a ton of video games, and I am like I'm the most conflict averse person you'll meet, right? But like Kade said, I was going to use that same example of like people, you know, playing Call of Duty games and watching the, you know, the sanitized depiction of like the Iraq war during the aughts, and then this shit in Ukraine, and they're just, you know, they're just like primed to be like, yeah, fuck, I'll go fight. Like, what's the worst that can happen? And then they get there, and like the Ukrainian officials are taking their passports and giving them guns with no bullets and being like, you're here until we win or you die. And it's like, you know, I don't want to get into the politics of the war, but like, you know, I don't get how you could ship off to fight for really anything. I mean, there's like, I can think of like some pretty outrageous examples that I would go fight, but like, I mean, I've got kids, even then I wouldn't, you know, but these dudes are like all gung ho about it. And it's I think it's partially because of the entire like media apparatus around war in America. And I mean, fucking esports and Call of Duty are like, it's one of the biggest industries in media. Like, I don't think you can detangle those things.
I think that's, you know, a good way to summarize the issue. And I think another question before we get into, you know, what we intended to embark on is actually the subject of parapolitics, because you guys dabble in it a lot. And conspiracy theory tends to be one of these really contentious topics, especially on the left, which in America is such a broad term that means anyone left of Ronald Reagan to like the most radical anarchist you know in your neighborhood kind of shit, right? So it's, you know, the term left is already kind of discombobulated, but
yeah,
at the same time, like the approach to conspiracy theory and the kind of engagement with it that all Americans have had, particularly since post-Vietnam, like there is a conspiracy culture that everyone's exposed to at some point in their lives. And also post 2016, all the good liberals have been telling us do not engage in this, but have also one kind of dabbled in the did Russia put
Russiagate, right?
Russiagate, but then even with Trump stuff, there's the QAnon stuff, and I think you guys have a very healthy approach to parapolitics in that there are certain events that just don't add up. And in a left-wing perspective, they're useful in kind of unpacking the ways in which any institutional left has been demobilized, debilitated, and kind of taken away from the mainstream. So
For
it's
sure.
useful for us on the left, I think, to adopt a certain approach to it. But at the same time, I'll admit that some of these discussions particularly make me squeamish. I engage with it. I'm kind of with you guys on some of this, but just some of the stuff that you unpack is pretty violent. It's not stuff that's pleasant. I mean, things like Program to Kill, for example. I never read the book. I read the one Twitter thread, for example, and I could not sleep for a couple hours that night. But at the same time, there are all these occurrences, things like Gladio, the Dutroux affairs, that they just exist in red ink on a page,
Right.
and you're told to ignore it, but you squint at it and you're like, what is this supposed to say? So my kind of approach to all this has been, well, yeah, you have a 1% as a class that has a class interest to defend itself, and people with wealth and power are corruptible, and hence they do these kind of perverse things at times. Now, whether or not we focus on it extensively is one thing, but what has been the approach you guys take on mind games, and how should the average Joe approach this topic? If you guys have recommendations.
I think.
Go ahead, Kate.
Oh, you're good.
I was just gonna say, just lean into it full bore, go fucking crazy, give a girl a copy of Program to Kill on your first date. No, no. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who get they get real up in arms, and they talk about like how conspiracy theories aren't materialist, right? Like it's it's almost like metaphysical, right? And I don't buy that. I think that that's a very like blinkered way of looking at it, because I think like, and this is smarter people than me on Twitter have like helped inform this opinion, but it's like, what is like a corporate boardroom if not a place for conspiracy coordination, right? Like, it is people planning in secret to use the tools at their disposal to accomplish a specific goal. Like that's not an outrageous thing to suggest that. I mean, any group of people, and especially those with like a vested class interest in maintaining their power and their wealth, right? I mean, I would say that, like, I think there's, so I guess to answer your question explicitly, like, I think the left has to at least understand that, like, sub rosa shit happens. That's, I mean, you can't look at, like, you mentioned like the demobilization of the left, and it's like, how are you going to try to understand the history of the 20th century and the second half really without things like you said, Gladio, COINTELPRO, the Operation Phoenix, like Operation Paperclip, all this stuff is like documented. Now, I personally go further, right? Like, I think that, I'm, without listing all the conspiracies that I believe in and why I believe in them, like, I think that, I don't know. I would say that it's important to be realistic about, like, what would you do to protect your, position of power, right? Would you shoot the president in Dallas? Maybe, I think I did, like, to me, it just doesn't seem outside of the realm of possibility. I mean, that instance, Kennedy was killed by the CIA. I'm sorry, but you know what I mean? Like, but yeah. Kid, what about you?
I don't know. That was a lot. My approach to conspiracy theories and political conversation in general is that I don't honestly. I'm such like a like not a poser, but like I'm just like I engage with this stuff with my friends who I'm very close with, and when I want to have arguments with my in-laws. So my a lot of my like video games, a lot of my interest or disgust with any of this gross stuff or stuff that isn't gross just is purely out of entertainment or conversation with my friends. I mean, not really, but like that's the only time I even worry about it. I don't I don't know. I'm not I don't subscribe that much. I'm much
You
more
actually
casual.
you gave a good bridge there actually, which is with the kind of advent of conspiracy entertainment and true crime entertainment to a kind of similar end as well. There is an aspect of that that also can't kind of be separated from what talking about conspiracy,
Yeah.
as well as like there's the entertainment factor, there's the fact that like it's fun to talk about. So there's also like that. How do you separate the mix, especially when you're trying to get people to take it seriously?
Well, I don't know because that to me the burden is not I don't that's why my outlet for discussing this stuff and learning new things about it or being proven right or wrong about things is just through doing the podcast with my two close friends. So I don't really engage with it on like not to sound like shallow, but like
It's
on a
not shallow at all.
yeah, but like on a basis where I'm gonna go out and try to do something to change it. It's more that I'm just like talking shit about stuff, but rather than like people, it's like video games and the government.
I think that's like, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to sound like I'm talking shit, but like I think that for the vast majority of people, I mean, obviously there are accounts on Twitter I follow that are like actual like researchers or activists or people who are really, trying to advance a political project that I agree with, and I'm very thankful that they're out there. But like, I mean, at the end of the day, for I think most people, this stuff is nothing more than like a hobby. And I'm not trying to like diminish that for people. Like I'm not like, I think that hobbies and interests and, there are much worse ways to spend your time than like reading about the history of the CIA or the history of, the Third Reich never ending or whatever. But I mean, I think that people should be realistic, right? Like I'm not somebody who thinks that Twitter is ever going to like do any good for anybody outside of just, make friends. Like, we're here talking because of Twitter, which rocks, but it's not, we're not going to see, the next, like the wave of communist activism springing up out of, threads on Twitter. It is a hobby, and that's again not trying to diminish it, but I mean, I would say that Mind Games is first and foremost entertainment, right? And we try to make it good entertainment, right? We try to have fun. We try to not talk too much about shit that we're not familiar with, and like we try to make it informative, but it's not. I mean, and I know that's a cop out that like everyone from Jon Stewart to Chapo says like, oh, it's just entertainment, but like that's really all this shit is. You know what I mean? Like,
But
I don't
yeah, and
know.
I don't mean to say that like I don't take things seriously or that like I'm not
No.
I don't care about any of this stuff. I just am saying that I am not one to give advice on how to like enter it into the discourse outside of just like trying to make it silly and like
Yeah.
just overhearing like our conversations or whatever, as opposed to somebody like Jimmy who's like actually doing something that's educational.
Right.
So I'm just saying I'm not like there's definitely people out there who could answer that question, but I'm not the one.
And then that's okay because like I didn't mean to like make it sound like, oh, you
No,
guys are just
yeah.
hobbyists. That's not what I meant to say at all. But it's like it's good to kind of view our discussions and our approach to this stuff with the level of scale that they deserve, because you never want to be one of those guys who's like, yeah, I tweeted some real shit and I'm about to take down the state with this. You never want to be a mark like that. But also, like, again, here at the greenhouse, you know, we've kind of posited this idea of like the United States is an empire. That's a bit of a tired and hackneyed line in some circles, but I stand by it. And, you know, it kind of makes sense to me in my rudimentary way to kind of look at the American citizen to some extent as like a citizen of the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire uses its military and financial power to influence results outside the heart of the territory as well as inside.
For sure.
So the oppressions applied to, you know, subjects external and at home. And that's kind of the same thing here today. I mean, you have all the shit that happened in Latin America, things that still may be going on with AFRICOM, our roles in, you know, sanctioning and covert affairs, God knows where. And then also, again, in the United States with things like police brutality, with things like, I don't know, putting the heart attack gun on Bernie, like shit like that, you know? And I mean, again, there's things like this that are always kind of sus, like from recently, the kind of subway shooting that happened and the cameras went off. You never know what to make of that. Is like, is the NYPD incompetent or was it a domestic gladio? Who's to say? Or even, you know, the original, yeah, or even you know, the original Ferguson Black Lives Matter activists all disappeared,
fucking killed in their car, and then their cars burned up, like 2 bullets in the head. And it's just like, yeah, that's just gang violence. That's just that black on black crime you're hearing about all the time, folks. Nothing to look at here. You know, like, no, I mean, I think that like, you know, empires always you know, Pynchon talks about this in Gravity's Rainbow, where it's like, I have an obligation contractually with myself to mention Pynchon on every
I have not
podcast.
read Pynchon, so go off.
Okay. So he talks about colonies as being outhouses where Europe goes to take a shit, right? In Gravity's Rainbow. And he also talks about how the things that are tested in the colonies are brought back, right? Like, it's, you know, you establish the techniques of control and subordination in the colonial space outside of the empire, and then those techniques and technologies make their way home, right? And I think you can see that, like you mentioned, police brutality, right? You've got, you know, Israel as like functionally a colony of the United States, right, in the Middle East. And then, you know, you see the oppression of Palestinians. And then now, you know, there are ample number of police departments across the US that send cops to go train on like suppression techniques with the IDF, and then they just bring it back here, right? Like, it's literally, it's not. And like, no, I totally agree with you, and I don't think that kind of thing is a conspiracy. That's just self-evident, right? Like, you know, you've got these powers, why not put them to use everywhere that you can exert control?
Exactly. And when that power is applied covertly, that's where the parapolitical element comes in.
Right.
And, you know, that's the lens, dear listener, that we'll be using to analyze what we wanted to get into. So a couple of months ago, I approached you guys to talk about the game Assassin's Creed 3. So kind of like the list of games we mentioned earlier, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, BioShock,
Far Cry 3,
you know, Assassin's Creed 3 kind of came out around the same time. And I remember it being a really anticipated game within the Assassin's Creed series.
It was huge.
It was hugely anticipated. It was a big marketing push. And it was, you know, set to take place in the American Revolution, and to the huge market share that is, you know, American gamers, here's something you can pitch to them directly. And especially, like, this is post Gamergate. So gamers have started to have their bizarre political awakening, whatever shape that had taken.
I think it's generous to call it a political awakening.
Yeah.
We are
It's not
trying to do the political awakening of the game. That's our goal.
political awakening in the sense that, you know, politics as entertainment is
Right.
something they're actively consuming, right?
Right.
That's being applied to this subject. And just like how we were all in high school, you know, at the time these games came out, for me, actually, this game was somewhat formative.
Okay.
So to give you guys some context, I know this is TMI. I may be doxing myself. Oh well.
No such thing.
So yeah, you know, I was born here in the United States, but for a time I was doing high school in India. And around the time that I moved back here, so I think I moved back here like halfway through 11th grade, something like that. After that, Assassin's Creed 3 was like my only introduction to American history in a serious
Nice.
way.
Yeah.
And I ended up taking AP US history. So then I got the real lowdown. And that taking US history actually was my descent into the left wing. But yeah, for anyone who wants the real history, you know, don't play this fucking game. Start with Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States and work from there.
Yeah, it's a good start.
That's a very good start. And the storytelling setting of the Assassin's Creed games, of the Assassins and Templars, is already one of these things that has a lot of like esoteric and conspiracy theory backing behind it. The Templars, as you know, Jimmy talked about on his recent episodes, you know, they are this mythical organization in a way, and a lot of mystic and esoteric groups, you know, tie themselves as descendants of the Templars. The Assassins or the Hashashin are like this mysterious order of the Nizari sect of Shia Islam, and they form this effective backdrop for this game that has this unique construct. So I'm going to go through my game. I'm going to go through my notes here, but basically, what prompted me to talk about this game with you guys is an interest I had in kind of unpacking this topic of American civic religion. And what that kind of refers to is the way, like I call this fifth grade civics understanding of politics, where people still revere these institutions and these figureheads of US government as wise, neutral, and sage in some way, and above the nitty-gritty of politics. But I think the past couple years or so have proven that to be otherwise, and especially those of us comfortable with parapolitics are, you know, comfortable enough not subscribing to those fantasies, but a lot of people still do. And
It's Hamilton, the video game.
it is Hamilton, the video game, in a
Yeah.
way, because you have this fascinating setup of, you know, these two secret societies at war with each other, both powerful enough to influence historical events. And what you get in this game actually is that American history played out as it was. All the founding figures were somehow untouched by any of this white hat, black hat conflict. Right. And you know, George Washington's a stand-up guy, and if only we did something about slavery. That's basically the game.
Yeah.
So, any memories of this game and anything on the replay that you guys noted? Because I replayed this on the Switch, and let me tell you, that remaster is not a remaster. It has all the same fucking problems it did on the PS3.
So I didn't replay it for this show, but I did. I played all of it in high school. I think I was also in 11th grade. I'm 27, so whatever. However, I don't know how that works out, but and I remember like, and I hope we could talk about this more later. Like, I think there might be an Ubisoft angle of conspiracy games that's worth digging into a little bit. But I remember playing it and kind of just being like, almost like more kind of disinterested in the American Revolution outside of the aesthetic and like, you know, it's cool to fight with a musket or whatever. But I was pretty into the like overarching plot with Desmond and with, you know, the Abstergo and I forget, and the Assassins, I guess.
Yeah.
But it definitely, it didn't do anything to challenge any conception that I had of what the American Revolution was. that's not its prerogative. I mean, I think that it's in fact its goal is to, reinforce the. I mean, I think the civic religion basically, and to kind of bolster the myth that is told to people, right? But from a little bit more, if there's like the 5th grade civics that we all get, this is like 8th grade, right? Like it's a little edgier. There's the violence, it's a very surface level discussion of racism and genocide against Native Americans, but like it's not, at the end of the day, it's just reinforcing what the ruling class would have you believe about the founding of the country.
Yeah, my experience with it is that I remember when we were in high school that it was like a huge deal, and I was like, I thought it looked cool because I thought you were going to be like doing like guerrilla warfare stuff.
Oh, the trailer made it look so badass.
Yeah. So the first time I played the game was last year after I had played all of Assassin's Creed Origins, Odyssey, 1, 2, and Brotherhood. So I went in thinking like this is it's supposed to be so cool. Some people really hate it, but like so many people say it's like a revolutionary Assassin's Creed game, and then it's just like this is just the last 3 games, but instead of buildings, there's just like the same tree
trees, right?
But no, I mean, as far as like the American Revolution like mythos surrounding it, it's like, yeah, it's so like watered down and boring compared to like murdering the Pope in Assassin's Creed 2, which like you can get away with, and I don't know if it's like a time period thing or if it's just an like you can't do that with America. But definitely, it definitely just felt like in all the ways all those games work, it was like a slumped down, lazier version, and I feel like it was made worse by being about the American Revolution, because it's just like, did you ever watch that? There's a PBS show called Liberty's Kids.
Oh my god, yeah.
That's
I
like
haven't
what this
seen
game
that.
is. It's like Benjamin Franklin is like helping him every week to show them a new invention.
That sounds awesome. I'm gonna show that to my boys.
That one episode where they see a guy get tarred and feathered definitely traumatized me.
There's also an episode where they decided to deal with smallpox, and that stuck with me for a lot of my life.
There was another episode where the kids like help out this French mercenary.
Yep.
And I'm trying to think what else. Oh yeah, Benjamin Franklin has a slave the entire show, and they never address it.
Nope. He's just like a friendly another character. It's
right.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, do they even mention like that the founding fathers had slaves in this game? I don't remember.
So I can
don't
count
remember
on my
either.
fingers the amount of times slavery and racism are kind of brought up. So the mentor figure, Achilles Davenport, doesn't even talk about slavery. He kind of makes this very unoffensive jab at the fact that because I'm black, I'm gonna get noticed. So you gotta go do it because you look Italian. Despite the fact that Connor is dressed in buckskins, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but you'll pass for Italian. I can't go in. So
right, yeah.
So that was a weird thing for Ubisoft to say.
I will say a good thing about this game, which is in your notes, is that Connor's like fucking 6'5", 250 pounds.
The most jacked assassin to date.
You can like slam into people, and
he read Moby Dick and lifted. That's what happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that reference. There's another reference to Sam Adams owning slaves, and it's only mentioned in 2 cutscenes. Never ever brought up. And then the 2 times where you go to the Congress Hall in Philadelphia.
Yeah, there's slaves.
There's slaves working in the background. You cannot interact with them, and they're just kind of doing like a single animation of working on the floors. And then the final reference to slavery, not counting the DLC, because the DLC is somehow better than the game.
Right.
The Tyranny of King Washington DLC. So
Ubisoft does that a lot.
I don't know how they fucked that up. But yeah, the final reference to slavery is like the final cutscene of the game where It was evacuation day. The British troops are leaving, and there's that famous moment where they fired a lone cannonball at Boston Harbor, and it hit the water, and it never that was the end of that conflict. So Connor sees that, laughs, and then he looks at the corner. He sees a slave auction, and it's just these kind of blank-faced black NPCs looking dejected, but there's no context on why this is bad.
Right.
We're just supposed to get the picture as Americans that America's great. Slavery happened, but we don't want to think about it. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, I think the most generous reading that you could have for that scene is that the game is trying to say the war is over, but things aren't perfect yet. But the implication is that, and again, this is the most generous reading. I'm not saying this is my reading, but the implication is then, all right, well, when slavery ended in 1865, then everything's perfect, right? It's all good, now, which again just does the same work of reinforcing the narrative about what America is and has been and will always be.
Yeah, I feel like they put themselves in a tricky situation by making a game in that time period and then having one of the biggest supporting characters be a black guy. And then it's I'm not going to mention slavery, and you're also going to help all the founding fathers who are also slave owners. So I understand why they don't say anything, but at the same time, it's it just seems so backwards.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering, should I get into the plot summary? I'm just gonna have to read my notes here, and you guys can interrupt as needed.
Okay.
Because it's a bit of a convoluted ass plot. Warning: this contains spoilers, but y'all knew this going in.
Yep.
Okay, so plot A is the Desmond Miles story. So the events of past games have led Desmond to the vaults, where they are supposed to find the key to stopping the impending disaster. Desmond is traumatized to some extent by being an escapee of the modern day assassins. He tries
Hang on, just to jump in. I feel like we should clarify that the whole premise of the Assassin's Creed game,
yes, let's get
if you're unfamiliar, is that there's a not so distant future. There's probably a year, but I don't fucking know. It doesn't matter. But basically, there's a company called Abstergo, and they have developed a technology that allows you to access your ancestors' memories and to live them, right? In real time. I mean, you're unconscious, but you experience them as though they're yours. And the main character, at least for the first 5 or 6 games, is named Desmond Miles. Desmond something. Yeah. And he is, I believe in the first one, he's kidnapped by Abstergo, and they're trying to he is a descendant of this ancient order of assassins, and they're trying to use him to find out where the let me back up. Abstergo is the Templars, and there's this eternal conflict between the assassins and the Templars. And the Templars are using Desmond as a genetically an assassin to access his memories or his ancestors' memories and find out where these different artifacts are that will allow them to harness unlimited power or whatever. It's you're kind of, I remember being impressed with it when I was a kid. It's pretty typical sci-fi shit, but so each game, right? When we're talking about in this game, the protagonist during the American Revolution's Connor. There's Ezio in a couple of the games. These are his ancestors, and so you play both as Desmond in the narrative's present day, and then you play through his ancestors' memories. So there's these 2 plots kind of happening concurrently.
Yeah, thank you for catching me there. And again, dear listeners, I'm sorry for how convoluted this plot is. We are doing our best.
Yeah.
There's so many games.
There's 10 plots running.
I didn't know they were comics, and I did know there was a movie because the remastered Ezio games come with 2 anime movies, and I'm no, I don't think I will. But yeah, anyways, it's insanely complicated, and then it keeps just either characters just disappear or anyways, it's trash.
Yeah, it definitely is, because a lot of it is bad, but you know, Assassin's Creed is like Bionicle or the Marvel Cinematic Universe in that sense, because if you have these big multimedia projects to keep people engaged in whatever the product is, they'll stay engaged because there's more content to consume.
For
So
sure.
that's the business model for Assassin's Creed.
Yep.
And that's why you've got 10 plot lines running at once. But basically there's 3 core ones. The first is the ancient aliens conspiracy theory making it into Assassin's Creed, which is there were ancient aliens that made humans and they were the gods basically, and all our religious iconography and esoteric iconography is a reference to them. So that's the first conspiracy theory that makes it. The second one is the fight between the Assassins of Masyaf and the Knights Templar. So if you want a real lowdown of that history, Jimmy did a 2-part on his premium feed about that. So check that out. That's a lot more conclusive than what these games are arguing. And then the third is the modern day plot line. So the descendants of the previous 2 stories dealing with the fallout of it in the present and going back into the second plot line to relive the memories of their ancestors.
Oh, because he's also a descendant of the Isu or whatever, right?
Exactly.
That's how he can touch all the crap. Okay. all
Exactly.
the shiny stuff.
Which again, novel concept if only they took it more seriously. But
Yeah,
it's Ubisoft. What the fuck were we thinking?
right. I mean, that's the thing, is that, like, yeah, at the end of the day, like, I mean, there's a reason why this stuff is popular. It is like there's an interesting core there, but it's just so poorly executed. And if I'm remembering correctly, I mean, it's been years since I've played the original game or the Ezio trilogy or whatever, but it's it definitely diminishes in quality. Like, I remember being pretty hooked on the plot, and then it quickly just becoming like, this is unintelligible.
Right.
Well,
right.
yeah, it just keeps it's gotten, having played, like,
Kate's played all of them, so
I guess at least, yeah, like an hour of every game they made, except for like the 2D ones. Yeah, it gets way worse.
Yeah, I haven't played one since Rogue, but basically, you know, for those who do not want to read the Assassin's Creed wiki or have no interest in watching a playthrough, the kind of you know thing to take from this is after the first game, because you have the literal Order of Hashashin versus the actual Knights Templar, and then from that point onwards, the Assassins and Templars are kind of like white hats versus black hats. Deep state within a deep state kind of thing, and they play out conflicts in different historical eras, with each historical era being the setting for a new game, basically.
Right. I mean, and that's one of the issues that I have with it, or not. I mean, I don't even know if it's an issue, because it's like so many games do this, but like it's just taking the idea of conspiracy theories and just kind of like putting so much in a blender, so many different threads and things that, like, you know, there's maybe some truth to it or a lot of truth, and just like blending it all together and kind of giving you this mishmash of shit.
Right.
You know, because like you look at, and also at the same time giving a pass to, you know, groups and organizations that I think are actually, you know, bad actors, right? Like, you know, both the American ruling class and the Brits. I mean, fuck the Brits always, but like during the American Revolution, it's like there's no good guys here, but the game kind of wants you to have sympathy, definitely sympathy for the Americans, and also like the British are, you know, basically dopes being manipulated by someone else.
Exactly.
Right. It's not that there's a class struggle going on, or there's no materialist critique. It's, you know, it's that these ancient aliens left some artifacts, and people more powerful and smarter than the ruling classes of the burgeoning America and Britain, you know, those are the real bad guys, you know.
Right.
And I feel like it gets like incredibly vague immediately, like with this game, and it doesn't really stop they can't even like they don't stick with the fact either that like either side is necessarily good or bad. Like they just start arguing in every game like the Templars do some bad stuff, the Assassins do some bad stuff. We're all the same. Like they don't,
Right.
and then it just they do the same thing. Like I guess in 4, there's you just like he falls into all that stuff, but like in Rogue is all about like who's worse with all these like random vague events that like causing different catastrophes to happen.
Yeah, and I think I might have to jump steps in my notes here because I feel
No
like
worries.
I should still get into the plot summary, but I feel like this will contextualize this better.
Yeah.
Is I was trying to figure out like how does the plot of this game tie itself to a parapolitical angle, and the way I try to look at it is so Connor and then the main Templar antagonist, Hatham, which is his father. I kind of view them both as like operatives of different ideological strands. Connor is this kind of like young idealistic guy who thinks that because he has these kind of bare minimum principles on the violence he does, like not killing innocents, that makes it better somehow. That because it's him who's righteous doing it, that there won't be blowback, that he can, negotiate things and keep, the spread of information controlled. And then his mentor on the same side, Achilles, has been there, done that, and failed, and is telling him it's a fool's errand, but is still helping him because he feels obligated to for whatever reason. And then on the opposite side, you have the Templars who are kind of shown as the opposite. Like they're shown as being more willing to interrogate, torture, and maim their victims. They have no compunctions about being polite. And they have this kind of sense of if we don't do it, everything will turn to shit. So it doesn't matter how harsh we are about it. That justifies our actions. That seemed to be the only way in which to contextualize their actions as far as morality goes. But morality in video games has always been shit. It's actually very hard to do in practice. So
Yeah.
I sympathize with the devs in that regard, but that's why it's very problematic. But I'm going to do my best, I guess, to try to sum up. Do we want to start with the modern day or maybe with the historical part?
I mean, I feel like the modern day is. I mean, what do I know? But I would say we could probably just skip it and just basically say Desmond's trying to get artifacts and
Right.
keep the world from ending. Like, because you need the context of the first like handful of games. It's just like,
okay.
I mean, I don't know. It's up to you, but that stuff to me is like we'd be here for 2 hours.
yeah. No, you're fine. And like I'm just trying to find the best way to do this because again, Assassin's Creed just has incredibly convoluted plot lines. So, and I don't want to keep you guys longer than we need to. So I'm going to do my best to be succinct. At the start of the past storyline, we initially play as Connor's father, Hatham Kenway. And he's kind of done ambiguously, right? Like he's in the midst of the French and Indian War. It's implied that he's a member of the Assassin Order, but they kind of use you're one of them and I'm one of them, so I'm going to kill you. And there's this big plot twist of him actually destroying the Assassin Order in the colonies and being a Templar the entire time.
Right.
But he has this relationship with a native woman who is Connor's mother. The voice actress for Kanzatio is the character's name. She also plays Tannis on Letterkenny, if anyone's seen that show.
I've heard it's good. I haven't seen it.
Yeah,
it's basically modern day Trailer Park Boys.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, it's worth checking out. So she has a relationship with him. It doesn't flourish into anything long term, but she has his son Connor, and he's accepted by his people. But he's confronted by all of the Templars that Hatham befriended in the first part of the game, and they're basically like, "Hey," they kind of hold him at like a choke point, like, "Hey, tell us where the elders of your village are, or we're gonna, or you're in trouble." He refuses. They knock him out, and he wakes up to his village being burned. So he kind of finds out through like the events of his life that his people have been given the responsibility to guard an artifact. That artifact is one of those ancient alien things. And the ancient aliens basically say, you have to do this because someone in the future, i.e. Desmond, needs you to do it. There's no grander justification given than that.
Right.
But it's done in this kind of spirit journey style event in the game.
Don't you fly as an eagle?
Exactly.
Like, yeah. Yeah. Very,
so that's the part. Yeah.
very considered, way of depicting native culture. You got your spirit animal or whatever. Like,
I know that they consulted a specific Mohawk band regarding the language and the voice acting and some of the cultural depictions. I hope that was one of the scenes they consulted on too.
right.
I hope they didn't hide that. But again, I tried looking up like what the consultation was, and it's actually very hush hush. Like who's consulted about what?
Yeah, I'm not all that surprised to hear that.
Well, and I almost feel like stuff like that a lot of the time is like, how little can we, like, what can we do that we can still get away with? But then they do stuff that's so like vague or lame that it just winds up being more offensive, like the eagle.
Right. Or even like they felt the need to do this whole segment in Kanyen'kehá:ka language, which was cool at some level. But this is something that I didn't find out until I looked into it, is that it's actually meant to be spoken with no intonation, which is a traditional thing, I guess. But it was one thing that the game was criticized for, is like, why are all these segments bland? And they never decided to like consider, oh, well, we could just have them do it in English, or we could just rush through it, or like question the need of the segment at all. So that's one aspect of that.
Well, and it's just like comes down again to the fact that it's like you're making a game where you're gonna, have all the founding fathers be superheroes, but then the main character is Native American, so you can't talk
and
about.
he has nothing in common with them, but he still feels like the right thing to do is fight on the behalf of the urban populations of New York and Boston.
Yeah, that's never that.
And
I mean,
barely mention like any any consequences for outside of their village being burned down by the Templars, but that's like they're evil. So
right. That I think that's like, in a nutshell, like that's like a really good micro symbol for what the game is about, which is just like, you've got the Native American dude who just somehow finds it within him to, ally himself with the people committing genocide against, anyone who looks like him. And that's not really mentioned or addressed. It's just, and that, it's very frustrating.
Well, yeah. So, and that I it actually gives me a way to rush through the plot even faster, because the spirit journey basically tells him, seek out the assassins. They'll tell you what to do next. The assassins don't even tell him, hey, you got to take a side in the American Revolution.
Right.
The tutorial mission just puts you in the middle of it. And then for some reason, Connor's like grows up 10 years in the next scene and is like, yeah, I'm gonna fucking take part in the Boston Tea Party. That's literally the rationale in the plot.
Yeah.
So a bunch of the games have always been, okay, so you got to hunt down a list of Templars amidst historical events and backgrounds. So all the 5th grade civics events are happening. Paul Revere's Midnight Ride, the Boston Tea Party, Battle of Bunker Hill,
Boston
and amidst these
Massacre.
events, exactly, you're hunting Templars in the middle of all of it. And you reach a point where Connor meets his father again, and they decide to team up. The Assassins and Templars decide to team up, and it's not clear why they're doing it either. But it's also to kind of tie into the daddy issues Desmond is having in the modern day plot line with his dad, which again is kind of ham-fisted, but that's another reason I feel like they did it. His father double crosses him while hunting Templars, and then they fight each other, and they have what I think is a pretty good dynamic while it lasts, at least, which is he's able to expose, so why do you fight for George Washington? This is the guy who burned down your village, not Charles Lee, who is the final Templar you kill.
Which is like a big twist, right?
Which is a big twist,
like,
but it never gets brought up.
Yeah.
Right. Because guess what? There's another DLC mission where you decide to help George Washington hunt down Benedict Arnold. After all that. So it's still it's very ham-fisted.
That's historically accurate, actually. That George Washington hunted down Benedict. That was his first act as president.
Oh my fucking god. So yeah, you kill your dad, but you also have to kill your childhood best friend from your village in a misunderstanding gone wrong. And Connor
Which
says
again
this one,
is just like it sucks.
well, yeah, because all it shows is like Connor as an indigenous person has to fight
Right,
on
it's just
behalf of
betraying
these
his
people.
own, yeah.
Betraying his own, and he says this line, which is like, "It seems our people will never be free," and that holds true for the rest of. That's like the most true shit they said in the game, I guess.
Right.
Right.
And
it's so like that's so lame and shitty.
it is like Connor is basically suffering in a lot of the main story, and the only glimpses of happiness you see are in the side missions, actually, which is very weird. So yeah, he kills the final Templar, who's the guy who choked him out when he was younger, kills him, and kind of, you know, takes a hatchet out of a post to signify that his war is over. And then there's that final scene of the game where, you know, evacuation day happens, the cannonball hits the water, and he sees the slaves, and he's like, well, America's free, but we got to do more. And then functionally, the game ends with the ancient aliens telling him he did his job, and he's like, but you know, my people had his village is basically left empty, and his people are kicked off their land.
Well, yeah, the message at the end is like, unfortunately, even though you worked so hard, all this had to happen, and like half of your people are gonna die. But that's just the grander plan. That's what God wanted. Was
God's plan.
God's plan. You literally did this for Desmond, and it's kind of if they wanted to be pilled about it, if they could have just done it the same way and then be like, nah, you did it to help out someone in the future. And it's Desmond, this fucking guy who's a dope up until like a few weeks ago in the story.
Well, any work with that would have been better than like, it's just it had to happen. Like slavery and genocide have to happen. That's the master plan.
And that's pretty much, you know, the plot of the game is, you know, Connor enables the, you know, liberation of the American colonies, gets no thanks for it. And his main mission, which was initially to keep his people and land safe, is just thrown down the train.
Right.
And
well, there's like a sense of fatalism to it, right? Where it's like Kade was just saying, like both of you were just saying, like, you know, there was no other way that this could have played out that would have allowed for the unspecified, you know, saving of the world to occur, like, you know, 350 years later or whatever. Like, you know, and in that case, the ends justify the means, right? Like, well, you know, it's a bummer,
like,
sure.
And something else might be a cool answer, but it's just in this, I feel like it's just a symptom of the laziness. And like, they go on to make a bunch of other games where the main like conflict is like, this person I like is a Templar and I'm an assassin, or the other way around. There's like 3 or 4 other games like that. There's Rogue is like that. I think Origins has that. That's in the one in France. Odyssey is the same. But anyways, it's just the same. It's like the start of when they just started like repeating the exact same like lame. Sorry to get away from it.
No, you're perfectly fine.
Wasted so much time.
This plot summary took a lot of time. I'm sorry if that got dry.
No,
no.
Not one bit.
Side note: do you think the crisis actors who worked at the Boston Massacre, like their descendants, are still took up the mantle?
I wonder.
What is it with Boston and Massacre, dog? What is this?
I wonder if any you know, descendants of the Boston Massacre were also at the Boston Marathon bombing.
That's
right. We've got all kinds of Boston underappreciated hub for parapolitical activity.
Right.
We
there
should
also is an optional plot line in the game where there's an optional Templar to hunt, and it all starts with a false flag attack. And I felt like if they just used that as the main plot line for the game, they would have had something there.
Yeah.
That like, oh, the admiral of the colonial navy was a Templar.
Right.
That would have been a suitable main story, actually, but they felt this need to like leave the founding fathers as these kind of civic deities.
And I mean, that's I mean, we talk about this a
honestly,
lot
it
on
is the
Mind
same.
Games.
Like it's the same thing with Hamilton. Like the last song, they're going to tell you about how things need to be better. I'm telling you, rather than if you're going to make yourself suffer, put yourself through either one of these, I would take the one that's like 3.5 hours long over the one that's like, I don't know, 35.
Kade is a closet Lin-Manuel Miranda fan.
Oh yeah, it's my favorite.
If it's anything worth confessing, you know, before I was in the left,
Here we
I
go.
really was a liberal, and there was a time in my life I could sing Hamilton front to back. It is. I probably could still do it if someone put me on beat, and it's a very embarrassing thing to admit.
It's okay.
But, you know, there's something about putting people of color in powdered wigs and making them rap that just is so catchy. I don't know what psyop they ran on us, but I guess what it goes to show is just people are easily influenced into thinking something's cool. That's really what it is.
Cade's being nice. Maybe you don't remember this, but like,
oh, I do.
Yeah.
I'm on the fence about.
you know, Cade's nice, and he's not blowing my cover. But when I first heard Hamilton, prior to, you know,
I think he literally
going
called
hard
me on
on
the
it,
phone.
I did. I either called you or texted you right away. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, this is so good. Now, in fairness, I'd only heard like the first 2 songs, and like
Right,
didn't
yeah.
get into like, but yeah, it was
It's all good.
I was taken too as a younger, naive man. You know, I think it's important that we're honest with ourselves about who we've been. You know,
I need to be more disappointed with myself though, because like, wow, musicals are great, and I'm like, you're fucking Indian, dude. Fucking Bollywood movies are all musicals. You like Hamilton, but you think this shit's lame. You need to get over yourself, hey Adi. Come on. Like,
well, the thing that's like worse, like the worst for me, and Cade can vouch for this, is like, I have always hated musicals. Like, so I was like so impressed that I was like, I'm making an exception to my utter disdain for this entire genre, and like, you know, vouching for this piece of shit. So, you know, live and learn. You got to hold ourselves accountable. I think it's good that we called each other in, you know, and that we're taking responsibility for our missteps.
well, again, like, I'm gonna entertain this diversion just for a sec, because that's what modern media and the internet does to people. Is it makes people suggestible. I think that's what I believe at the most. And
for
I don't
sure.
know if you guys saw this thing that was going around TikTok of like, if you mix coffee and orange juice, it's gonna taste really good. And like, I saw these TikToks, and I knew objectively in my head, like, this is gonna taste like ass. And then for some reason, I decided to like pour 2 shots of espresso into some orange juice. It looked like fucking raw sewage.
Oh no!
I smelled it. It smelled nasty. I took a sip, and at least, you know, for its credit, it does not taste nearly as bad as you think it's gonna taste. But it tastes like what you think coffee and orange juice is gonna taste like.
Right.
Yeah.
But all these people on these TikToks are drinking this
That's
foul
the power of
concoction
suggestion. I got you.
and acting like it's ambrosia and shit. And I'm drinking this, and then I realized, like, no, the problem isn't that it tastes like shit. The problem is I went and did it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
the real fucking
absolutely.
problem at the end of the
Fair
day.
enough.
So again, like, you know, you have to that old line of "you are not immune to propaganda" is the truest thing that has been said. But you know, coming back to Assassin's Creed 3,
Well, I just want to say I am immune to propaganda, but it's true for everybody else.
that's the Mormon gene. You are
It
blessed
is.
with capacities that I do not have.
Yeah.
Okay, so to take us back to Assassin's Creed 3, just one of the things I noticed, you know, the Masons are a known factor in colonial conspiracy theories, right? And the Masons sometimes claim descent from the Templars. Some of them are seen as an offshoot of the Templars. And the game actually makes oblique and explicit references to Masonic texts and artifacts, and has a system of tunnels that you can use for fast travel underneath New York and Boston,
Right.
that are designed by the Masons and have the Mason seal all over it. And
Only
it's
cool
never
shit.
mentioned outside of like one cutscene that these exist. It's optional to use them. Connor never like examines like, so why do the Masons have a fast travel network? And it's also weird that the Masons are never seen as like allies of the Templars or the Assassins, except for Sam Adams allegedly, but he's never shown as an assassin. You don't have members of the Continental Congress who seem to be members obliquely in any other way, except for one guy, and he shows up for 5 minutes. It's like Sam Talmadge. Who the fuck is this guy? I don't fucking, or Benjamin Talmadge. That's like an offhand reference I recall, but it's never anything intentionally made clear. So that kind of existence is like, huh? Did Ubisoft know not to piss off the Masons there, or is this just famous Ubisoft laziness with games? That's just one of those things that makes me cock my head to the side,
I think it's both. Not to the point, not to the extent where they're like afraid of anything. Just that everything has to be so like saccharine and fake and nice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think, and like I think that kind of gestures towards like what my developing theory about, you know, Ubisoft conspiracy, you know, use in their games is because we tried to do an episode about Splinter Cell Conviction, right? Thinking because it's a Splinter Cell game that it would be this really
doesn't
ripe
Tom Clancy
text.
have his name on it, by the way?
Yep. Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It's the Tom Clancy franchise. And we were like gung-ho about it, thinking it was going to be this really great game for us to cover. But what ends up happening in that game, and I think a similar thing happens here with the Masons and some other stuff, is that, like I said, like Ubisoft just says, like in Splinter Cell, they're like, oh, look at this. We've got an assassination attempt on the president. Ooh, look at this. We've got some domestic Gladio stuff. Oh, look at this. We've got some hints that there's mind control. Like, but like none of it is used to make a point, right? Like it's not trying to say anything about the conspiracies that it's trafficking in. It's just using them as, you know, narrative dressing for the plot. And I think that same thing happens here with the Masons, right? Like it is an interesting angle, and so they included it. But like, I mean, maybe it's lazy, maybe it's just that, you know, their purpose isn't to try to really dig into that kind of thing. But yeah, why not throw some, you know, Masonic symbols in these tunnels so that we can, you know,
what
make
I would
it cool.
wonder too is like, because you know these games have like teams,
right,
like, of writers. So
dozens of people probably.
I don't know if it's like a thing where like the head writer has like this is what we're gonna do, and we have to get this team of people to dumb it down, and B, like take out anything that seems too like scary or risque or whatever, or if it's the type of thing where it's just like, you know, you have 12 different people with like a bunch of ideas, and they're just like trying to thread something through the buzzwords and through all the ideas of all the stupid like overarching future story and everything too. But like whatever it is just a mess. But
yeah,
I'd just be curious to know more about like how they, because it's just like the same stuff keeps happening, but it gets worse every year.
It just doesn't seem to me like,
on top of the fact that all those people, like, it sounds like a horrible place to work, and like who the fuck knows what goes on.
And that's something that I tried looking into a little bit, is like the production process of the game. And the fun thing to note about Assassin's Creed now is all the original heads who worked on the first couple of games are no longer involved with Ubisoft in any way. I tried to check them out for like any esoteric links or like any like interest they may have had in the subject matter. Maybe I'm just not good at finding some of those links, but I couldn't find anything. The writer Corey May has written a lot of video games. But there's very little about his writing process. And even like some of the voice actors involved, you know, like Noah Watts, he did a great job with Connor's voice acting, I think.
For sure.
And his career didn't really get a boost after this game. And as a side observation, but also like he didn't have much to say about the production process in certain interviews he's done. So I don't know. Maybe I got to get him on the show at one point and be like, "Hey,
there may be like
what was that like?"
Contract stuff where they can't talk about.
Yeah, he could have signed an NDA, but it kind of, you know, Ubisoft has that famous work culture of you know, it's seen as like this abusive
Crunch.
workplace, crunch, a lot of sexual harassment at the workplace as well was a commonality. And also just it's a very anti-fan kind of mindset they have to their games. Like Alex
For
Hutchinson,
sure.
yeah, he said that he hates people using Twitch to stream his games.
Yeah, I saw that.
Which you know, fuck him. I ended up streaming this game anyways. I don't care that no one watched the stream. I did it.
Right, just on
Yeah.
principle.
Just on
Right.
principle. Yeah, streaming sucks. I don't have a lot of fun with it. If you like doing it, good for you. But you know, I was definitely wondering why am I streaming this shit? But now knowing that Alex Hutchinson said it, I take it back. I would do it again in a heartbeat just to piss him off.
Yeah,
Well, it just seems like the type of company that like is obviously they have. I mean, because when you like agree to the terms, I'm sure they have like a literal metric for every single thing that happens in any of their games now. So regardless of like what people vocally say they like or don't like, it's
Mhm.
like, you know, we're gonna base the entire next game off of like the top 10 things people clicked on in the last game. And
Also,
that's
just
it.
another observation
And just making
too.
a shit ton of money.
Oh, you're fine. Like another observation too is like there has been no desire by the company to revisit Connor in any way, shape, or form. There was one side comic they did about him and his kid, and then I think in Valhalla they go back to that same region at some point. But of course,
Yeah.
that doesn't reference him obliquely. But I think whoever it was at Ubisoft just said like, we're okay that the fans are doing fan fiction about it. We don't want to revisit it. We think we're done with it. So
well,
it kind of just leads me to believe like, did they just hate how it went?
I think, I mean, if I'm remembering right, and again, this is over a decade ago now, but like, I remember the game was, I mean, like super, super hyped, and it,
I'm sure it sold extremely well. It just also, if you go like on YouTube and look up the game now, like most of the videos that are popular are like, this is a masterpiece. I don't know why everybody hated it. It's like that, but in 10 words.
you know what? I just remembered, this is a total sidebar, but the only time I ever went to a midnight release of a video game was for this game. I just like,
Wow.
yeah, I was at the GameStop at Largo Mall, and I remember waiting outside and feeling like, at the time, this was fuck. Oh man, this is like I'm having like an Abstergo memory moment right now, because like, so my girlfriend had like just recently went off to college, and I was still a senior in high school, and so I was like sad and lonely, and but I was very much not like overtly like a video game nerd, right? Like I dressed like a fucking beatnik, and like Kate and I would like talk about poetry and shit. Like it wasn't, so, but I was excited about this game, so I went, and there was a dude there who was dressed up like head to toe like Ezio from the previous games. He even had like the fucking knife thing,
the hidden blade. Oh,
and
that
then,
was a dark time. Dudes will be wearing hoodies, using a bottle opener as a hidden blade and shit. You know,
yeah,
we all did that shit.
Well, get this. So I was waiting there, right, waiting for it to be midnight for the fucking GameStop to open, and the security guard for this mall like rolled up in his golf cart, and he like got out, and he was talking to us, and he's like, yeah, dude, like I really love these games. Like I think they're so fucking sick that, I'm like, it's cool you guys are here. When I get off work, I'm gonna get some rest, and I'm gonna come and buy it. And then he's like, yo, check this out. And then he starts like this, like your extremely stereotypical fucking mall cop. He starts lifting up his shirt, and he's like, I think I'm an assassin too. And he's got like 15 knives that he's pulling out from like his boots, like under his, like he like opens his button
down. Is this like the
pulls...
Blade security guard on Twitter, or is this even worse? Like,
no, this is worse. He's armed to the fucking teeth, and he's like, and then all of these like real sweaty video game guys and me, right? So I guess I'm one of them in this moment. Like, I'm like, man, this guy's gonna kill somebody. Like he's like so hyped, and he's got like curved blades, he's got throwing knives, like he is like ready to kill people. And I was like, I'm never doing this again. I'm done. This was a mistake. I'm not. These are not my people. Like,
oh my god.
Yeah, it was like that, man. Now I can't believe I didn't.
I think I've heard that story.
Really? Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was like November of 20. Whatever year that was, 2012.
I do have a really strong memory of, I don't know if it was like specifically you or just people that we went to school with, but just being like a huge, for some reason, everybody was super excited about it.
It was a big deal, man. And
Yeah.
that's what I was trying to get to, is that like I think part of the reason, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I think part of the reason that Ubisoft didn't go back to it is that it got hit pretty hard in the reviews. Like it didn't live up to the hype.
Yeah.
And I think that I mean, like, I'm not trying to cut Ubisoft any slack here. I'm certain that they're not like chomping at the bit to make another game about an indigenous person, but it probably didn't hurt that people panned it for all the reasons it was panned. I think that I could see them, especially being as like numbers driven and money driven, being like, yep, we're moving on. We're going to do Pirates now, you know?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy how much they like hold on to a trend though, because they did 3 Ezio games.
Mm-hmm.
The pirate thing was a huge deal. So they did another pirate game, and they did a big long DLC pirate game. And then they haven't really, I guess they thought because Valhalla sold so well. So they thought they hooked everybody with that one. So that's why we're on like the 3rd year or whatever of Valhalla. But the next one's supposed to be live service, so that'll be great.
Huh.
Great. More of what we need.
NFTs and yeah, more of Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that at the end of the day, for me, man, my cat is so horny right now. It's disgusting. She is like rolling around and making ungodly noises, and my dog is like triggered by it. But
I don't know if like a lot like more than any other big industry, but I feel like maybe just because it's such a direct to consumer thing. Like I feel like Ubisoft is a good example of just video games in general being like anti-employee and anti-consumer. It's just about making the board more money.
Well, it's good that you guys brought up those things, because like I do remember the fan backlash to Connor. Like Ezio was this charismatic, charming character that, you know, we grew up with for 3 games, right?
Right.
And then
Connor was brooding.
Connor's broody, yeah.
I mean, man was jacked. I'm sorry, he's more my type. But anyways, like you know, Noah Watts, I think, did a very compelling performance, despite being given, you know, pretty shit direction from the game directors, I think.
Yeah.
And also, like, if you take the story for what it is, why wouldn't he be a brooding kind of guy?
Right. I know it makes perfect sense.
So I definitely think that, yeah, like the fan backlash was a thing, but also, like, to be honest, like the discussion around like how technically demanding and how exploitative the games industry was never really something gamers were aware of. I think I want to say until 2016 or so that people really start waking up to this kind of shit.
Right.
And I think, like, you know, especially like we were all young that time, so it's definitely not like we were paying attention to this stuff either.
Yeah, no.
I think that was definitely the kind of age of like, you're young enough to enjoy video games, and you're also young and blind-eyed enough to think, oh, I would actually love to make a video game one day.
Yeah.
Not knowing what just developers in general are like up against.
Well, and I feel like it's really only been the past couple of years where there's been like widely publicized like complaints and like people
accounts of the abuse and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Because like I feel like controversy from like when we were in college was like, oh, Konami and Kojima can't get along or whatever. Like,
right. Like Gamergate was the only thing that happened around the time of that.
Right.
For us, I think. But another thing too, like especially with the remaster of this game basically just being a port over for the Switch, right? And even the game at the time of launch was incredibly laggy and it felt unfinished. And the way I look at it is, it was basically just them developing a new game engine that they just used to plug in Assassin's Creed 4, Far Cry, Watch Dogs. Like that's what it ended up becoming. It was a largely unfinished game because I think they promised a lot, and this team was given no support to do it. You know what I mean?
Here's my theory, and I've talked about this on Mind Games before. Yeah. Ubisoft will literally never like finish a game or like have a full concept ever, because every single thing is just what it's basing itself off the last thing. Whatever's going to make more money, that's what they will make next. And but as far as technology and mechanics go, literally nothing ever stays the same since maybe like Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood, but just in Ubisoft games in general, everything is always just like a bad evolution on the thing before it.
Yeah.
For sure. No, I mean, because Audie, you mentioned earlier that it's like similar to Marvel, and I think that that's like, I mean, Ubisoft is not, they're not as big, but their business model and their prerogatives are very similar, right? Like it's, I mean, it's just content made by an algorithm. Like there's no intention behind it. There's no human with a vision, right? Like it's just running numbers on spreadsheets and saying like, all right, well, you know, like Kade was saying, they, you know, the gamers clicked on this one quest 10 times more than any other one, so we have to include something similar in the next game.
Right.
It's not about, it's not like not a passion project or anything like that.
Because I guarantee you, whatever there's like when they do interviews like they did with Valhalla, where they're like, we really wanted to make the world smaller and do all these things that like the gamers said they wanted. What they're talking about is whatever proprietary software they own that tells them what people wanted. They're not talking about game reviews or what people
Kind of like
actually
Netflix
spend
in that
ratings.
way.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have any proof for this, but it's pretty obvious.
No, I mean, it makes sense because like I mentioned this on my episode I did about Marvel, where like they're all basically the same like formulaic model, but you put them through a different filter for each superhero.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
kind of like Ubisoft is like the Assassin's Creed thing is whatever warrior archetype is popular with the kids.
Yep.
One day it's the French Revolution, the next day it's Vikings.
Yep.
You know, Far Cry is whatever ripped from the headline setting. One day it's
Southeast Asia, right?
Southeast Asia.
Far Cry can be anywhere that the CIA has had a presence at.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, remember that one they set in like rural America around the time Trump got elected?
Yo, that game sucks. So there, yo, all right, hang on, I gotta
I feel
go
like
off
we've
for a
talked
second.
about it.
Go for it.
What it does, it sucks so bad. We talked about it on the BioShock episode, but go ahead.
They code that cult as being like explicitly white nationalist, explicitly like fucking white supremacist, and there are so many people of color in the cult wearing like wearing the flags, like the NPCs that you're killing are like probably 30% black and brown people, and it's like, this is complete, again, you like, there's no, you're not trying to say anything here, you're not actually concerned. It's not even like me being like, oh, this is like some lib bullshit, right? Like about like the rural white American, right, Trump supporting poor person. Like it's not even that. It's just like,
it's ripped from the headlines bullshit.
Yeah, that is all that it is. And it's like maddening because it
well, they lured people in with whatever the trailer was. I remember,
yeah,
it was, I don't know if it's because there was a black woman in it or what the connotation was, but everybody's like thought was that they were telegraphing this is a game where you're gonna like fight racists. And maybe I don't know if this is around the same time or soon after Wolfenstein.
Around
2
Wolfenstein, I think, where like they were talking about, is it okay to punch Nazis and shit? That's
right.
where
Yeah.
So, and it, like the combination of all that stuff was like, when I got it, and not having read reviews or anything because I'm an idiot, like, yeah, this game is gonna be about like going and like fighting like a racist cult, and it's just like it's just the most asinine, stupid, like nothing character. It's just like a really, really bad, like Jonestown with no like.
Oh, God.
right. It's trash. Ubisoft can get fucked. I'm done with that. I'm gonna say we're not doing any more Ubisoft games on Mind Games. That's probably not true, but that's how I'm feeling right now.
Definitely no Ubisoft games on Greenhouse Gaslighting. We're done here for sure. I guess final take though on these Ubisoft games, you know, are they shit coding with some of this conspiracy stuff? Because they definitely like pull in just enough esoteric stuff that's convenient to write a plot with. But they're not even saying anything about it. They're not even trying to do a limited hangout.
Right.
I don't know. I think I've said before, and I'll say again, is just like, I don't think there's enough care put into it one way or the other to try to say anything, which is like a lot of the time when they have been leaning in a way that has been something I've agreed with, or like the way, you know, just what we argued about with Far Cry 3, kind of like about the indoctrination of a person into like violence and becoming a killer, but then
Right.
at the end of the game, none of it matters anyways. Yeah, I don't know. I think that I guess they could be like trying to say something negatively, but I just feel like there's not enough there to say one way or the other. I think they're just trying to make it watered down garbage.
Yeah, I don't think that they're like, I mean,
I think
maybe
they unintentionally do plenty of negative stuff, but
absolutely. Like, I don't, maybe I'm not like, maybe I'm giving them too much credit in terms of just sheer incompetence, but I tend to lean towards that. Like, I mean, I would probably differentiate between like the Tom Clancy games and like the Assassin's Creed games, because I suspect, if I had to guess, there's more insidious intentions behind like the Tom Clancy shit. But with Assassin's Creed, I just think it's like, it's just the Da Vinci Code, right? Like, it's not a, I mean, it's shit coding because that's like a common thing when people are using conspiracy and narratives, like to delegitimize it for people who are actually, you know, reading through, you know, newspaper clippings from 1973 with, you know, fucking whatever serial killer. Like, so in that sense, it's shit coding, but it's not intentional. It's just lazy people who, you know, want to just have a quick way of making their shit compelling. So like, we're going to mention the Masons, we're going to mention the Templars, we're going to mention ancient aliens, and that's going to catch everybody's attention, you know?
yeah. I mean, I think the most damage they usually do is just like taking something that is vaguely serious, related to a serious subject, or something that is, I guess, like compelling, and either like infantilizing or doing caricatures of like real stuff that just like, there's people out there who like video games are their only, that's where they get their ideas from.
Right.
Like it just says it's out there that it could be causing damage just by making everything like a stupid vague cartoon version of real life.
Yeah.
But that's the same with like pop culture, action movies, like, diversify your intake.
Yeah. Yeah, have some, like, I mean, that's like the thing is like, I mean, I think, and this I've talked with a buddy of mine about this with Marvel movies, but like have expectations as a consumer, right? Like, just that's it. All you got to do is just not just uncritically accept whatever bullshit is, not only from like a political perspective, but from an aesthetic perspective, right? Like, just ask to be challenged, like ask to be made uncomfortable, right? Like, you know, and that's because people don't, and that's how you wind up with, you know, they're going to show Doctor Strange 2 in like 8 out of the 10 theaters at your local movie theater, the 10 screens, I mean.
I will say that Ubisoft has personally done me damage by wasting my time
and our money,
lying to me. And this is the second Ubisoft podcast I've been on where like I'm going in and I'm like finding meaning in all of it, and then we get like an hour in and we're like, Ubisoft is bullshit. It's all fake. So I think they're winning in the end, regardless.
Well, I think both of you like made very sage points there. Is like, you know, you have to challenge yourself with the information you consume, because one, challenge is how you grow. There's no real like negotiating with that. But it's like, again, like I get it. Like sometimes it's fun to watch a stupid Marvel movie. I get it. We've all been there.
Right.
But it's like, you know, yeah, who doesn't enjoy a combo number 6 from Taco Bell sub beef or beans with fucking Baja Blast. Who fucking doesn't? It slaps. Like, you got to go to an actual taco place at some point too, man. You
Right,
can't-
exactly.
That's really it.
I think with video games in general, it's like, you know, don't expect a profound experience. Don't expect something life changing. Don't expect something like that is going to educate you. But if it happens to like be cool or like crazy, like God of War or Last of Us or something,
Or
that's like
Elden Ring.
or
Elden
yeah,
fucking Ring.
I
I'm
had
here
a
to
deal,
plug.
I had a deal with myself that I wasn't gonna bring it up.
I'm
Well, I'll
doing
put it this way. I have not had a chance to play Elden Ring yet.
Okay,
If
cool.
you guys want to make any like
No.
fucking points about it, go for it. But
It's just great.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
all I want to say is I have not been like I have not actually cared about playing a video game or been excited like actively throughout my day, and I'm like my brain is totally broken. I've been reading the wiki pages. Like I probably should stop. It's probably
So
time,
good though.
but it's amazing. It's so much fun.
But point being, like, yeah, obviously don't get your politics from Assassin's Creed.
yeah,
That's the moral of today's lesson.
that's absolutely it. And I think if we can tie all the threads we put together, I actually have this written down in my notes, so I think I can read this verbatim. And then I think that should tie our discussion together, I think, is, you know, when I say American civic religion, I'm referring to the kind of reverence for the founders, American civic institutions and processes, and the stated ideals of the founders, the kind of shit you're acculturated to by popular iconography, fifth grade civics, and just the general cultural malaise we're all exposed to. And I think from, you know, what we understand about the design process, the market incentives, gaming culture at the time, and just the pervasive belief in those things drove the direction of Assassin's Creed 3. I've complained, and I think we all complain, you know, that this game half-assed a lot of things, but of all the themes in this game that's mostly adhered to, it's one that venerates the founders in abstract and minimizes their errors insofar as maintaining that abstraction. And, you know, we understand that a video game can't always, you know, address this kind of stuff. But in effect, the founding fathers were or represented the wealthiest of the colonial elite. And the kind of, you know, easy summary I use for people is like, these guys were the Fortune 500 of their day, just coming in to legislate their own country. And I bring this stuff up because this kind of thinking and this kind of, you know, reverence for these founding myths of America, what that, you know, thinking allows for is a populace that can accept the militaristic and imperialistic practices of the country and can more easily stomach more unsettling and disgusting elements of its parapolitical apparatus. So when we, you know, are exposed to this kind of shit about, you know, Hamilton or Assassin's Creed 3 or any of these like nice feel good things about the American mythos, it's very easy to then distance yourself from the realities of Operation Condor, Operation Desert Storm, Paperclip, all Gladio, all of it, because that's, you know, that is the exact opposite of the myth.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that it, you know, like it lends a coherency to it that is kind of like self-perpetuating, right? Like if the intentions have always been good, starting from prior to the founding of the country, then it stands to reason that currently our intentions are good. And any mistake that we make is ultimately excusable because it was done in the name of good intentions, right? Like so it's important to have like because as soon as you start to look at, I mean, any one thing, one historical moment for what it is, right? Like you said, I mean, this was one ruling class like conducting a revolution against another, right? This was not workers rising up. This was the bourgeoisie or whatever. Then all of a sudden you're looking at a very different picture. The intent, you have to change your idea of the intentions, and it becomes much easier to kind of unravel the rest. But it's important to have this sustained narrative across time, starting with the American Revolution and Assassin's Creed 3 and culminating in things like Call of Duty Modern Warfare, where it's like it's always that, again, mistakes are maybe made, but at the end of the day, the good guys are trying to be good, and we're doing what we can to stop the bad guys, right? Which is just never the case. So
Yeah.
I want an Assassin's Creed game where you get to go back in time and kill all the founding fathers.
I think you get to eventually do that in the DLC, but I digress. It's a 6-hour playthrough you can go watch. It's also just as ham-fisted. It's just, oh, what if King Washington found the apple and decided to be king? That's it. Nothing special about it.
Well, any excuse to kill him. I'll probably play it now. You've sold
That's
me.
not an actionable threat. He's dead.
He's dead. Yeah. Fuck that bitch.
There you go. We got over the loophole.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts? Because I think we've kind of exhausted the topic, and I think we can jump to the other item we had. Barring anything else.
No, I think this is, you think of like an Ubisoft game about American Revolution, or just like, according to this, and especially Far Cry 5, just America in general, this is exactly what you'd expect.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Yeah, no real surprises here.
Okay.
Which doesn't really answer your question, but
no. Again, like everything that's been said so far has been sage advice, and it's a novel topic that you guys are trying to combat here, which is, in what ways do video games propagandize people? And the thing about propaganda is that it actually doesn't have to be smart. It doesn't have to be intelligently orienting people to anything. It just, what's that quote from the Metal Gear games where it's like, it's not censorship that's going to confuse people. It's the deluge of information that's going to confuse
it's Metal Gear Solid 2, right?
I believe so. I never played the games. I'm just aware of that's a quote.
Yeah. Well, I think to dovetail into like what we wanted to talk about next, is like, it doesn't have to be smart. It just has to be pervasive, and there has to be enough. It has to be happening on enough different like fronts, so to speak, that it no matter where you turn, you're going to run into it. And I think that's like, because I'm going to go ahead and introduce this so that you don't have to introduce your own Twitter thread, because that would be weird. But Adi posted a good little thread the other day when, what was that lady's name? She's that fucking crazy lady who was like talking about how she, like, her 18-year-old was.
Oh yeah, so
yeah.
weird.
To summarize it, it was another Twitter main character of the day.
Yeah.
Who, and it's actually, the background's a little bad because this person is white and she's fostering 2 black kids, and that opens a whole can of worms about, like,
right.
Do white foster parents know how to adequately raise black children? And that's always a can of worms I never want to get into. But
She did say today that they are white. So I don't know. That's what she posted that today. I don't know if it's true. I'm certainly not going to defend her. I think she's a fucking idiot. But regardless, she's got these 2 foster kids, and she was basically complaining about how she, like, washing her daughter's hair is emotional labor or whatever.
Which is, and this is a common theme we talk about here on Greenhouse Gaslighting, is, all this academic language found its way into people who are desperate for clout on social media, and they find a way to, 1, make things about themselves that shouldn't be about themselves, and 2, misuse specific academic theories and language in ways they're not meant to. So to unpack the term very quickly, emotional labor is about on-the-job shit that women particularly have to do. So things like roles like, air hostess, for instance, you have to be exactly this kind of feigned niceness, this deflection to other people's worst instincts, men making a pass at you at the workplace, and you kind of have to like suck it up and take it. That kind of shit is what emotional labor referred to. And what this lady tweeted, I don't want to it upset me, because she was basically making it this kid's fault for wanting to confide in an adult who was a caregiver. That's what the tweet was, is, this 18-year-old came to their foster mom about some issue they were having, and foster mom decides for some reason to tweet about it, that I have to do emotional labor as a crisis counselor for this kid. That's basically the tweet. We don't have to get into it any further. Should I read my tweet, or do you want to read it?
I'm going to read it so you don't have to. So you wrote, what we should understand from today's Twitter main character of the day is that we live in a society that at some level fundamentally hates and resents children and childhood. I don't mean that in a pro-life Christian way. What I'm referring is the way in which neoliberalism and capitalist realism have caused us to fundamentally become incapable of caring for the vulnerable, such that the idea of adequately caring for the needs of children is seen as an endeavor that is not profitable. And I'm here to say that some things can't and should not turn a profit, nor should profitability be a determining factor in assessing the priorities of a healthy society. This kind of thinking is fundamentally misanthropic and disgusting. True.
Mic drop me.
Yeah, right. Well said, man. But I thought the reason that I wanted to bring it up was because I think that one of the ways that it's very clear that society hates children and the idea of childhood is the way that video games are, the place that they take culturally, right? Because you have this media that, in my opinion, like, and we kind of talked about this with Jimmy, I think, on his show, but like, there's so much potential, right? Like there's promise in the ability to like have a more hands-on experience with a narrative, to be able to like more closely but still vicariously experience other things that you wouldn't otherwise, based on your class position or your like, your identities or whatever. But instead of having that possibility explored, right, you have, because of capital, the limits of what a video game can be are basically circumscribed and are turned into, whether you say that the violence is an attempt to, get people excited to go to war in Ukraine, or just something that happens by accident or whatever, like, you're giving this to children as their entertainment, right? And I think that that's like, again, I'm not trying to sound like Tipper Gore here, but that sucks. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying it's turning kids into killers, but like, your innocence about like the world, your ideas of what like human possibility can be, or instead of exploring that, you're being shown, how to mutilate people, how to rack up a body count and worry about your KD ratio or whatever.
Yeah, because I see a lot of people complain about this shit, where it's like, these goddamn kids are always on the goddamn tablet. But like, here's the thing, no one is really stopping, the fact that kids today, the way we keep them occupied instead of, having their parents interact with them because their parents are so fucking busy all the fucking time.
Right.
Or,
Roblox and Fortnite.
Exactly. It's like, you have kids basically having to find their own entertainment, and the easiest thing to do, because all living things, not just people, but like animals do this too, where they want to expend their energy in the least complex way. Moving around and using your brain both involve a lot of that. So it's easy to put a screen in front of a kid and keep them occupied. Guess what? They did that with us too. But I feel like I grew up at the right time, because the kinds of things that constitute children's entertainment for me, you had a properly funded PBS. You had things like, and I mean, I'm going to sound like fucking Jordan Peterson with this shit, so bear with me, because I'm not going to get into the Disney.
I was going to say, just don't start crying.
Don't start crying. Okay, no, I have never taken benzos in my life. That's not something I do. But you have these things like, I mean, there's that very famous clip of Mr. Rogers testifying at the US Senate, begging for PBS funding and getting it, because what he's saying is like, this content that we're trying to make for kids may be like, the only like wholesome shit they get access to.
Right.
And it's better that kids see this as opposed to literally anything else on TV. And for what it's worth, you have things like Mr. Rogers, Sesame Street, all the different PBS shit that was more educational and kind of wholesome for kids at the time. And now, I mean, it's a hellscape. You have like AI generated shit like Coco Melon to like these weird like YouTube has-beens like making bizarre sexual shit for kids. Like if you remember some of that stuff from a few years ago.
Oh yeah, the Elsagate stuff.
The Elsagate stuff. I mean, it's a kind of thing where it's like, and especially like with like my peer group and stuff too, is like the discussion around having kids is always foreclosed. You know what I mean? Like there's always that kind of topic of like, well, it's your choice if whether or not you want to have kids. I think that's orthogonal to the discussion. What I feel like is like the question of whether or not I can start a family has already been predicted by downward mobility.
Right.
And things like like having kids, oftentimes people talk about the financial burden, but here's the thing. It's a financial burden to keep people alive. That's how it works. We should stop calling it a burden and just accept that like these things have costs, and it is not a bad thing for people to have needs. But we resent people who have needs because we expect people to be profitable at the end of the fucking day, and kids should not be profitable. I'm sorry, I don't know why that's a radical position.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. I mean, I think like, not to sound hyperbolic, but like I think like one of the great tragedies like in that I've witnessed is that I mean, how many people, Cade, that we know are like, yeah, I'd love to have kids, but I can't afford to. You know what I mean? And it's like that, like, not, I mean, not to sound super trad or whatever, but like, it's awesome. Like, I mean, I love being a dad, and I love having kids, and it's hard as fuck, and it's, I'm very poor because of it, partially because of it, but like, it's like, but I don't know. It really, really sucks that, things have to be profit driven, and that the drive for profit is also what's contributing to, or causing even, the complete trash that the kids are being given, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even like fucking look at like school lunches, right? Where, I mean, all of this stuff comes back to, like you said, that kids are not profitable, and so they are neglected, like like a systemic level, right? And that's what, like, that, like when you said, because you make a good point when you talk about like, well, all these people are like, oh, all these kids and their screens these days, and it's like, well, who's going to stop that? Like, where is that supposed to stop, right? Because you've created a world in which, like, that's unavoidable. It's not, like, I mean, my kids, to the best of my ability, like, they don't know how to use my phone. I mean, my older son's he's 4.5, right? He doesn't know how to use my phone, but I took him, I got him in daycare recently, and I just recently found out that like they use tablets at the daycare, right? And it's like, I mean, I'm not saying that that's like a bad thing. They've got to learn eventually, but it's like, you're kind of like just yelling at the sky, I feel like, with a lot of this stuff, and it sucks. But like, yeah, what are you gonna do? How are you gonna? The kids need the screens, even though it sucks at the same time. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, it makes a ton of sense, because like, we have, for reasons that are profitable, have a more technologized, I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah, it works.
But, technology is more widely available to people in a way that's far more pervasive than it was, let's just say 10 years ago, right? Let's just say even more than 20 years ago. And I was on the cusp of growing up with technology, or having seen a period of my life where I didn't have it as accessible, and then having it. So I think I was like 3 years old playing around with like a Windows 95 my dad had. You know what I mean? That's how early I grew up with it. And we're still processing the effects that technology has on people. And for me personally, like with my mental health, especially like over the past 2 years and stuff, you know, the brain body link is important to understanding wellness.
Right.
And I'm not trying to go on the Joe Rogan tangent here. I'm just trying to,
No, please do.
Okay. Okay. Well, pull that shit up, Jamie. Anyways, so, you know, the way I see technology, particularly with the parasocial nature of things like social media and how people put so much emotional worth into shit that doesn't matter, is when you're on social media, you're kind of like a Gundam suit. You know what I mean? Where like you are not you in your body using your phone. It's your brain using the computer to talk to people on the digital space. And that's not me trying to be like tech bro or like this digital futurist. That's just shit I've noticed that made me feel more depressed.
No, I mean, I think that like,
well, I think to bring it, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if you sounded like a to sound like a futurist, you would have had to say what you said and then been like, and that's a good thing, right?
Oh no, this makes me feel like shit.
Exactly, right. So you don't sound at all like a futurist.
Okay.
But I think like there's a definite like cycle between the fact that like children now like are partially, I mean, a lot of children are partially like taken care of by some sort of device, or like for like to give them a relationship to another human being or to like interact with the world in a different way. And children have historically been like, if you look at like the way, this is a dumb example because I'm a nerd, but like Star Wars, the Empire Strikes Back is like funded by merchandising by George Lucas because he wanted, the only way to fund it was to sell a bunch of toys to kids. But anyways, my point is just that like this is the weirdest time because we've had the first time where it's like a direct pipeline where the kids are on the screens can directly advertise to them while giving them the only like good relationships or good experiences in their lives. Not that's a dramatization, but you know what I mean. So it's
and
like
for some kids it's true. I mean it's not, you know, and
it's like the scariest like one-to-one pipeline between like corporation child. But I think like that extends to video games like Roblox, which is just like an exploitative machine on children and developers, and like Fortnite with all the like microtransactions and so on and so forth. Like you can draw a line from one to the other.
Yeah. It's Fortnite's a good example. It's fucking gambling. Like it's just, you're just getting your kids hooked on fucking gambling.
That's where they hang out with all their friends.
Right. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. Like no, like I mean I'm not naive enough to think that politicians would, even if they had the willpower, like pass legislation against it, but like they don't even understand what the fuck it is. You know what I mean? Like, so again, what you have a kid and you're like, okay, well, what do I do? Do I deprive them of this thing that all of their friends are doing? And do I have them, you know, not be in touch with the culture that's around them, even though that culture sucks? Or do I let them and then be exposed to all of the shit? I mean, like, it blows my mind. Like, I mean, I've said this before, but like the whole Twitch thing, like, I mean, young people like legit think that Twitch streamers are their friends. You know, like that's like, they have this.
I was talking to my wife about how my son like was on her YouTube for 5 minutes the other day, and she's like, "Turn it off," because she like saw like a look in his eye or something, and she's like, "This is weird. I don't know why, but like because she's a therapist who works with children." Anyway, she's like, "This is the same thing with all the kids that I work with," and she's like, "I don't understand why it's so like it is brainwashing them."
It's mesmerizing, yeah.
It's like it's because our son thinks that person is talking directly to them and that they're best friends and they're trying to. It's so like it's scary.
Yeah, well, that's 100% it, because again, like, you know, kids have such a, you know, rich inner life and they are so vulnerable to like the world around them, and they're feeling things out, they're exploring everything, and
it's that extra layer where like they're familiar with the game or whatever that they're interacting with, either from playing it or from like seeing other people play it. So they're like interacting with that in their brain, and then they're also doing it with their friend who's describing everything that happens the whole time. And it is like a weird. I feel like for like a little brain is just like it is just like this is my best friend.
Oh yeah, because like again, like as a parent, you can't even entertain like, you know, their imaginary friends or like what they want to do for fun. Like I still remember what it was like to go out and play with my friends, but like I also grew up asthmatic, so like that's where the push into like video games just ended up happening for me because I couldn't always head out all the time, right?
Right.
But then with kids now, it's like you have parents working longer hours than, you know, parents before them 10 years ago,
Making less
you
money.
making less money, and it's just easier to like give your kid this screen and then they'll find a way to like hit the buttons to get dopamine. Because
Right.
that's what this is. That's what the online world is it's a quick dopamine hit that you can self-administer. That's really it. And
Right.
we found a way to give it to kids.
Right. And it's yeah, it is this
I
kind
don't know
of
if you
like
guys knew this, but that shit's addictive.
It is. It fucking is.
It's yeah, it's like I don't know. I think that like I not to sound too like hippy dippy or whatever, but I think that like one of the most radical things that you can do is like to try to like have kids and to try to like counter that, right? Like because I don't like I said, I mean, we're all just fucking jerking off on Twitter. You know, that's not getting anything done. We're not, and I'm not an organizer, right? So I think that like if there's any hope to come from anything, it's got to be through, you know, very long term strategy, which, you know, like have kids and make them so they're not shitty if you can.
Well, I mean that's the exact thing. Is like, you know, the whole discourse around starting a family too is just poisoned in a way. Like
Mm-hmm.
the overpopulation discourse is the most toxic shit I've heard because
Oh
you're
yeah.
blaming people for existing instead of the
Right.
real problem, which is consumption. So you're like resenting people who have kids and their kids first and foremost. Then, you know, the issue around birth control and reproductive rights has been poisoned by pro-life people. You know what I mean? Because
For sure.
you know, like that the compulsions of being forced to give birth are now like influencing people's decisions in a way that they wouldn't have back in the day, especially like in conservative settings. So that has poisoned the way people look at starting a family. And then things like downward mobility, especially like it's a foreclosed thought. It's like I would like to have kids, but I can't even afford it. That line you brought up.
Well, it's funny you said you said something earlier. You were talking about YouTube, I think, and you said something to the effect of like, you know, it's oh no, you were yeah, it was like the Elsagate thing, and you were talking about like the weird
Right.
sex shit, right? And it's like, yeah, like that's legit and real, but you even have, you know, right wing shit coding going on there with all this stupid ass groomer shit, right?
Which is the worst aspect of it. And I kind of wanted to say this because, you know, being a bi man and my partner is bi as well, right? Is that, you know, the conversation about queer people in childcare has been poisoned since the start of the culture war because,
Right.
you know, you had this active push to bar gay people from assisting in this field of childcare and, you know, looking after kids. And this whole groomer narrative started there, and it's just been taken to this ridiculous end now in a
Right.
way that, you know, doesn't even center the needs or seriously address the fact that sexual impropriety is a thing that happens and that
Right.
there's no restorative justice for any of the victims. It's just another political football.
Right. And that's the thing with like you can't talk about that without sounding like a right wing crank, right? Like
Mhm.
now you have to do this whole like, all right, look, I think I think that Elsagate was fucked up and bad, but I'm also not a fan of Ron DeSantis. Like I need right, like, and that's
Right.
an insane thing to have to say, right? Because they're two, like, they shouldn't even be held in the same breath. But you have this time and time again, like you've mentioned, like this repetitive right wing, whether it's pro life or the anti quote unquote groomer shit,
Right.
that's making it so that like any left critique, any honest good faith critique has to be preempted and differentiated from. And then even then, there's the whole like doth thou protest too much or whatever. And it's I don't know, it's fucking maddening. I don't know. Like,
no, you brought up a good point because at the end of the day, what sexual impropriety is about, sexual misconduct especially, it has less to do with the perversions of the people doing it and far more with the fact that the people doing it are exerting power over vulnerable people.
Yeah,
that's the case with adult victims, child victims,
human
whatever
trafficking,
the case.
all of it, right?
All of it is to exert power over people, especially people who are the most vulnerable and will not get the support they need or the justice they need, frankly.
Right.
And again, like it's worth bringing up because the whole reason to shitcode it, especially with like throwing LGBT people under the bus, not that any of us who care about this issue seriously care about that, because being LGBT has nothing to do with your propensity to commit those crimes.
Right.
It's more about your relative proximity to power.
Yeah.
But like I said in the past episode when I was talking to Josh, is like none of these people care about justice for victims. Right. It's just who can we shitcoat, how can we do it, and how can we make it expedient for us? Yeah. And get people riled up about it. That's really it.
Yeah. We need to positively and affirmatively identify rich people as the groomers. Doesn't matter what your sexuality is. If you're rich, you're a groomer. You're sicko. And you should be I'm not going to make you censor that. I'll leave it to the listener's imagination.
People with power and the means to, you exploit that tend to be rich. I'll just put it that way, more nicely.
Yeah. But yeah, America hates kids. It sucks.
And like, this is the tip of the iceberg, man. Like, have you seen this like Epic Games and Lego deal to start working on technology for the metaverse?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Specifically for kids? Look at that.
No. Yeah. Oh, this is depressing.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yes.
My kids will not be involved with the metaverse. That I can say for sure.
I neither.
They will. I play the one game with my boys, the one that comes on the PS5, the robot game. They love that, and that and Ratchet and Clank are the extent of their video game.
Yeah,
that's it. And it's gonna stay that way for as long as I can maintain it.
Yeah.
If I'm lucky enough to have kids, I'm gonna program the games for them.
There you go. Beautiful.
I'm not fucking playing. I'll just program the games.
Yeah. Yeah. You could do something, decent and moral. You could give them that. That would be awesome.
Right. Okay. I know that was a bit of a dark topic.
It's all good.
Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, I don't know.
We are both extremely cynical, and we both happen to have 2 children. So
yeah, this is just what goes on in my head a lot of the time.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, it's normal.
I appreciate the fact that we could have a frank and open conversation about that, because it's like I said, in a society that hates kids, talking about it is by definition uncomfortable as a result.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I do think, and I'm glad I've wanted to talk more about it, because I think that there are either parents out there who like don't feel very represented, or people who would maybe want to be parents, but it's, I mean, I'm not here to say like parents are oppressed or anything like that, but it's just, there's a lot to talk about, and especially on the left, there's a big anti-kid movement. I mean, look at any of the popular lefty people on Twitter outside of like the Brunigs, like none of them have kids, and it's talked about in this abstract way, but there's a lot of like, there's a mundane and like real element to it that gets passed over, I think.
Oh yeah, that societal conditioning and that the way it's expressed in rhetoric, like it's okay to feel, some level of antipathy to kids. I don't think that's okay, but again, for the reasons I stated in that tweet, we resent them for those reasons, and I don't think it's ever a kid's fault. You know what I mean?
No, never. Well, on that note, kids rock. Have kids if you can.
And I'll just say this because, like, some of my personal shit has been like this sense of not knowing if there's a future for me, and also like for people my generation, right? And I think another reason that never gets brought up in this is like, I think there's a degree of faithlessness in this idea of, do we have a future?
Oh, for sure.
And I think people who are, I'm not saying that every parent, but I'm not doing some like Ron DeSantis or Marco Rubio shit where it's like parents are making that's not what I'm saying, but it's like, having a child in some sense is an indication that you believe there's a future.
Or at least you have to try to make one. Right.
Well,
Like,
I don't think the like the despair or like fear of that goes away necessarily if you have children. I just think it's like for me anyways, it's more just like they're here now and we have to get to where we're going, so I don't really worry about it as much outside of my normal concern.
Right. It's really far outside your control, and like I think it helps to kind of center you around the things that you can control, right? Like, I'm going to make sure that my kid has like nutritious food today, right? And I'm going to try to, I read to my kids every night and things like that, where it's like,
and obviously, all things considered, me and him both have an extremely lucky situation as far as having kids.
Yeah, that's for real. But still, I mean, kids rock.
Yeah,
they're very cool. My son's been really into King Arthur stuff. I started crying reading this King Arthur book that I bought for him. I got my emotional, like, I've been very like detached from my emotions recently for like a lot of reasons, but I was reading like the end of it and I like got all like teary eyed, and he was like, Dad, because he thinks that people cry when they're excited, because it happens sometimes, and he's like, Dad, are you excited? And I was like, yeah, it's just excited. We're at the end of the book, but like, it was so fucking lame, but whatever.
Nothing to apologize for there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I'm never apologizing for that. My son will know that it's okay to cry.
It's also good. Yeah, cry in front of your kids. This is a pro crying in front of your kids podcast.
No.
Kid tested, greenhouse approved.
We're going too far. Don't cry in front of your kids. We need to keep that masculine shit up.
Right.
No crying.
Actually, no. I am pro never cry in front of your kids, except the one time you do, and then you show them what you're made of.
Right. You have to make it really good.
Fair enough.
There has to be like some...
I say this being a person that's like...
Yeah, when's the last time you cried, Kade?
Like,
you never cried.
Like, I have too many mental problems to cry.
I've known you... I think I've known of you crying. I've never seen you cry. And I think I can think of maybe 2 times that I know you told me you cried. Twice in over a decade. Well over a decade. So...
Kade, you're cutting out there.
Hear me?
It's kind of faint.
Yeah. When's the last time you cried, Kade?
I don't know. Maybe my wedding. Maybe when.
Are you serious?
I have no idea.
I always cry at weddings. You're good.
I'm in therapy.
No, the reason I said are you serious is Kate got married in like 2018. So that means he hasn't
That's not
cried in
that
4
long
years.
ago. It's not that long ago.
That's 4 years. All right, Adi, when's the last time you cried?
Dog. I'd say like a couple weeks ago. 'Cause,
Okay.
like I'll just admit, like at the start of the year, I was feeling a lot of like this kind of self-hate in the sense of like, is there a future for me? Is there, a way for me to grow up from some of the things I've dealt with in my past? And it was this more of like self-acceptance sense of like, it's okay to be me. There's
Oh
nothing
yeah,
inherently wrong with me. I can get
beautiful.
over it.
Yeah, that
It
rocks.
was a self-acceptance cry, really.
Right on. I
TK.
probably cried at some point between August and I don't know, the end of November.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, probably.
Peak time.
But
Peak time to
I
do it.
can't. Yeah, I can't. I don't remember a specific time. I remember the emotions. I don't remember the physicality. I could have been outside, on like laying on the ground. I don't know.
I got emotional. I was at work today. I was like bored. I was like listening to live videos of Bruce Springsteen playing the river. Like, and one of those, there's one from like that live album, like 1975 to 1985, where he tells that story about how he got his draft card and then he didn't get drafted, and his dad had been telling him for a year, like I can't wait till the military gets their hands on you. And then he comes home and he tells his dad he didn't go, and his dad says like, okay, good, I'm glad. And I was like, oh man, I didn't cry, but I was close.
Well, I will say, like, occasionally, I don't necessarily cry, but like, your kids will do something that is very exciting, or just like maybe upsetting because they're getting older. Kids just do crazy stuff all the time, and it will make you, at least tear up a little bit.
For sure. Out of the mouths of babes, right?
Yeah. Right.
Well, it is 12:15, folks.
Yeah.
It is past my fucking bedtime.
I already spent too much time uncovering the plot of Assassin's Creed 3, so I'd like to let these gentlemen go to sleep. So once again, I want to encourage you guys to really plug your show. Where can people follow Mind Games, and where can people follow you?
All right. You can follow Mind Games at, what is our at?
Isn't there's at Mind Games?
It is at Mind Games Pod, and that's Mind Games with a Z. And you can follow me at it's at pussy___teeth. And I am locked right now, but
More
if you
underscores every time.
no, there's been 3 for a while. Don't lie to them. But if you want to follow me and you hear me on the podcast, just shoot the Mind Games account a DM and say like, hey, let me follow you and I'll let you in. I have to be locked for personal reasons for a little bit. And Kade has the best at, so I'll let him.
My at is at Kade Likes Music 8, the number 8, and it's KADE. I post like once a week. It's either making fun of CJ, video game thing, or
both.
Or like some sort of animal that I think is cool or cute. So there's not a lot going on there. I'm not locked though, so this is the closest you get.
And the other, you can listen to Mind Games on, I think, most of the podcast. I don't really know how.
At least Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, the main ones. Where it's through Anchor, so whichever podcast platforms Anchor distributes.
You can also listen to it on Anchor.
Yeah. But we have been on a bit of a hiatus because of stuff going on in our personal lives, but we should have an episode about Wolfenstein 2 coming out in the next week or so.
Oh shit.
So, and it's a good one. We well, I don't know if it's good. It gets pretty. We talk about duck dicks a lot, but It's,
The intro is going to be amazing, though.
Yeah.
Even though Alex couldn't be here, kudos to him for the.
Alex and I worked
he's
really
getting
hard
this
on
together.
our cold open.
Yeah.
So
Alex does a really good job.
if you want to follow Alex too, I'll plug him because he's,
Yeah.
the end of the day, he is. Kate and Alex are my best buddies. Alex's is Mr. Cheese Pills. So you can follow him at Mr. Cheese Pills, and he's our other co-host and our editor. So yeah, come listen to the show. We have fun.
Yep.
I should say that more excitedly. Come listen to Mind Games. We have a great time.
They won't tell you to listen to their show. I will tell you, go listen to Mind Games. Unsubscribe from Greenhouse Gaslighting and follow Mind Games.
No,
Do it.
unsubscribe from Chapo. That's my goal.
There you go.
Peel
There
off
you
their
fucking
listeners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, this has been another episode of Greenhouse Gaslighting. Thanks again.
Wait. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
And I do. I'm so tired. But where'd the name come from? I was wondering about that.
It's a good name.
This is a good name.
Okay. I was just trying to think of something nice and alliterative.
Okay.
I heard you
you know-
talking about how you accidentally plagiarized it on another episode.
Yeah. So I mean, I didn't even know I plagiarized it. Turns out it's like a thing that liberal environmentalists have been talking about when
Gotcha.
Trump said he was the most pro climate change president, like in 2016. And then they called it greenhouse gaslighting. But gaslighting is a term that people have been misusing since 2016. And
true.
basically what talking politics and all this shit on the internet does is it puts you inside a greenhouse where you gaslight yourself, and it keeps getting hotter and you keep believing insane shit. Like, of course the price of gas deserves to go up. We're at war with Russia.
Yeah.
It doesn't provide us any of our oil. That's an example of greenhouse gaslighting.
Right on.
Well, I think it's a great name.
Same.
Yeah. So continue with your sign off. I didn't.
Oh
mean to
no,
cut
you're
you
fine.
off.
You're fine.
I was
dude.
just. I didn't want to forget to ask.
No, this has been a fucking blast. Do not apologize.
I feel like this was a giant mess. This is how I feel everything I recorded. This is why I don't listen to any of this.
I mean, dude, honestly, like, I don't even know if I'm gonna edit this. Don't even worry about it.
We gotta have you on. We'll have to pick a game.
I'll get you.
And we'll do that. We can talk in the DMs about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so to finally initiate the sign off, this has been another episode of Greenhouse Gaslighting. Thanks again, CJ and Kade, for coming through. And again, I do encourage all of you to check out Mind Games. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can find me at Fibonacci Sniper. You can follow the show at Pod Greenhouse. Yes, Greenhouse Gaslighting is taken by someone. Please, FOIA request the original owner of the handle so we can claim it. Thank you very much. If you want to support both our shows, what benefits both of us is leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. I don't know why. It gives people a boost on the old algorithm, and it would help Mind Games. It would help Greenhouse Gaslighting. Any podcast that you feel like deserves a lot more love, it would help any of them. And I got the links to our social media, their social media, and everything else in the description below. Till next time, peace out, dear listener. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.